talk about a hobby that became a business. It started about 10 years ago. I was at a gig. I saw some hands go up. Who else goes to gigs from time to time? I was at a gig with two friends, and the band began, and we looked at each other and realized that almost every single thing about the experience was wrong. People were talking. So here was a band called the Friendly Fires playing music, singing out their soul, and it felt like the entire room was talking and not about the band. Also, the bar was open. Why would you have a bar open with clanging back and forth when someone's trying to play music? There's also the obsession with phones. A majority of people were filming the gig, capturing video that they were never going to look at again. So I looked at my friends, Dave and Rocky, and said, this sucks. What can we do that's better? And Dave said, well, I'm a musician. I respect being up on a stage and having all that stuff happen. Let's leave and figure something else out. So we went to my house, and we said, we'll invite some friends, and we'll ask them, stay in the moment. Just be quiet. Just listen. You can have a drink, but do it afterwards. Just be there. Just be. And when Dave started to play music, it was absolutely magical. You could hear the clock in the background ticking. It was so quiet. And none of us had ever been at a gig that was so silent. So he said, let's do another one. And this hobby continued until we hit the fourth gig, and there was a line out the door of the house in Regent's Park where we started this and down the block. We said, oh my God, we're not the only ones who feel this way about music. What's going on? And that night it was so crowded that we needed help. So 3 people in the room helped us pitch in and set up the gig. And that was where was born a community, a physical community to help us make the gig happen. You can see me in the picture, the same hat, smiling in the background. But it was so crowded, we were like this. And that was when we decided it needed to be a secret where it was. Because if we told all those people, too many people would show up. So we had to manage how many people showed. And we needed to give this hobby a name. So we called it Songs from a Room. Does anyone know Leonard Cohen? Any of you heard of him? So, one in the front. So Leonard Cohen wrote an album called Songs from a Room, which is basically what this was. So we called it Songs from a Room. Eventually it became a bit clunky, so we shortened it to Sofar, as in almost so far so good. Secret gigs in living rooms. Why were the bands a secret? Because we believed and still believe years later that it's all about equality. All humans are equal. Every band is the same. We have 3 bands play on the night. Why should one be a headliner just because they're well known or have more followers on Instagram, and the other one be a little tiny support act? So from the very beginning, it was about all humans are equal. Everybody come along. The community pitches in. So we started to scale it, and it happened through word of mouth. Someone in New York said, I've heard about this thing you're doing. Can we do one here? Someone in LA, same. Paris, same. It just slowly started to scale. And it was all organic, still a hobby. Then, after doing this for a number of years, it exploded. That map is where it grew to. Every single point on the map is another place where the community had helped grow the same thing we were doing. Community-driven secret gigs in living rooms. But now it wasn't just London, it was around the world. And we weren't commercializing this. This was a hobby. We spent 0 on marketing. But people were buying into the mission and the vision of what we were doing, is just trying to create an environment, a listening room for musicians. Started in London, but soon around the world. I'm going to show you a short video, about 1.5 minutes, to give you a feeling for what it's about, and then I'm going to switch gears.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sofar Sound!
How many of you have never been? This is your first time? Wow. Awesome, awesome. So it's really all about the music. And whether you're in Brazil or Berlin or here, this is about all music is equal. Let's enjoy it, and hopefully you'll hear something you like.
Questions, but you don't know what they mean. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you very much.
So this was a music discovery platform of hosts, fans, and musicians. Started as a hobby and converted then to a business. So how did we do that? Well, with rapid growth came so many issues. Now, all of you are involved in venture, I think, at some point. It's your business. You're helping other businesses. There are so many issues when you're growing quickly. We were overwhelmed. And we didn't know where to spend our time. So 3 of the top ones, and maybe the most important one is the first one, is how do you scale your culture? Something when you have a couple founders, and then when you're 5, and then when you're 10, then when you're 50, now we're 123, and 2,000 volunteers, how do you build a culture that scales? That struggled us. That was a big struggle. Second, scale the magic. So if I have 1 gig a month, it's different than 10, it's different than 100. And if you're scaling a business, how do you maintain quality if it's that kind of business? It's really hard. And then this challenge of eventually we became a venture-backed business. How do you grow at the right pace while not destroying the company? We've all watched WeWork and other companies scale and not have a business model that works. So what is the balance between viable business and growth? And by the way, there's no right answer. There's no right answer for us then. There's no right answer now. It's a constant balance. Most importantly for us, how do we prioritize our time? I gave you 3 issues. Maybe some of you have some of those issues as well. But where do I spend my time when you're getting wave after wave of requests by people around the world to pitch in, participate, grow your business, take your money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So how do you spend your time? We were struggling. We were, in fact, drowning in how we spend our time. So we found an expert in helping spend time, a guy named Peter Boyd. He's advised Richard Branson. He works at Yale as a professor in his spare time. He's advised the Prime Minister or President of Costa Rica. He's a real guru in spending time. And he said, the one bit of advice I can give you is very old. Let's focus on something called rocks. Does anybody know this old analogy of there's a jar of your life? And and in the jar, what fits in the jar? Simplifying it, 3 things. The rocks, i.e. the most important things in your life. So personally for me, it might be health, family for sure. I have a couple kids and married, 2 dogs. So that's the second one. And then you have other rocks that are important to you. Maybe one of you is into cooking. Then what are the business rocks? What are those big things? But then we get to the pebbles. They're kind of important. and they come to you wave after wave after wave, and you're like, ugh, do I put the pebbles in my jar with the rocks? Is that important? And then comes the sand, like these little tiny things that might be rocks to somebody else because they're super important to somebody else, but they're sand to you. And guess what happens? You start filling your jar with everything, right? Like, if you don't have a strategy, it starts to look like that. That's how Sofar sounds look like. We were just doing everything at once. We didn't have a compass. Now, it seems ridiculously obvious, but it's not. It's not when you're scaling. It's not when everybody has a different opinion. It's not when your board says one thing and your co-founder says another. It's not when the hotshot marketing head that you bring in says a third thing. It's really, really challenging. So we then pressed the pause button and said, we want to be that jar and not that jar. We want to know where we can spend our time, line up everything against that, have ruthless focus, and kind of forget about everything else. So that's what we did. And after struggling, it really helped, I would say, save the business and turn it into a business that is now making money in the right way. So how did we do that? I'll speak for a few minutes about that and then open it up to any questions. So we had 4 rocks in our business, so I'm challenging you to think about your rocks. I did this personally as well. I have my own personal rocks, but then we had the business rocks. Everyone in the company knows what they are. Culture. I would say culture is number 1. So we talked about WeWork earlier, Uber, fill in the blank of companies where the CEO, the founders have bad behavior, culture doesn't scale, and it's a car crash. So I said from the very beginning, the culture is going to be really important, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Matters. Matters is why we do this. We are doing this to help young musicians who are unknown around the world. That's the other benefit of secret. You come, and hopefully you guys will come one day, you come to one of our secret gigs, and you will not know who's playing, and that helps the artist. They do not have to sell any tickets. They show up, and they get this intimate gig of 50, 60, 70, 100 people in the living room, and it's magic for them. So we have to remember as we're making money who we do this for. And that actually can kill our business too. I've had a couple articles, one in TechCrunch, saying, Sofar sounds just about making money. Not true. But the only way to send the compass on this is to focus on what matters. Magic. I said about scaling. When I started the business, it was 1 gig a month. Now we're doing 800, nearly 800 gigs a month, which I think is unprecedented. And we'll be at 1,000 by spring, 10,000 not long after that at the rate that we're scaling. Thrives is simply how we make money. That's the engine room. And of course, that's where all the KPIs and OKRs and business everything, that's the engine room. That's where that is. But our business doesn't work without 4 rocks working together. So the last sort of formal business slide, and then I'll tell a few stories, is around how each of those problems were beginning to be solved. Culture, culture, culture. So we said, anyone who joins Sofar Sounds, this is how we solved one of our culture issues, has to sign a contract. That's not a legal contract. You don't do it by pricking your finger with blood, but it's a contract that says that you are going to abide by our values, which are being community-led, which are being inclusive, which are loving music. Not really difficult, but believe it or not, not everyone is that way. Or be humble is one of our other ones. We stole that from Amazon. It's a great one. We had a board member who was not living the values. This is where the rubber hits the road. You have to fire people who don't live the values, and we've all been there with somebody in our company or someone in a company who's not living the values. They might be making you a ton of money. They might be connected to your wife or husband or partner or whatever, but you know they got to go, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and guess what happens? The cancer gets worse. It doesn't get better. We had a board member like that who wasn't behaving. We warned this person. How do you fire a board member? You don't, but we did. We figured it out. I also had to exit a co-founder. I mean, we take this stuff seriously, and without making these decisions, Sofar Sounds would have been dead, 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 dead by now. So with the culture, you have to live it, and you have to find techniques to make sure that you live it. Why we do this, I spoke a bit earlier. We're about the artists. It's still equal today. It's still a secret. We'll get into that a little bit before the end. Scaling the right way. We use Net Promoter Score. Our Net Promoter Score across 800 gigs is 81 on average. And guess what it was a year ago? 81. 2 years ago, 81. So on average, it's pretty good because that's what keeps me up at night is how is the product scaling? And can we be innovative while it's scaling? Growth versus viability I talked about earlier, but these are our 4 rocks. Most importantly, everyone in the company has to have an OKR against each rock. So that allows everybody to have a line of sight. Mission on the very top. Ours is creating music, creating space where music matters. Creating space where music matters. Under that are the rocks. Under that are the OKRs. Every single person in our company needs to know when they get up in the morning that they do something that matters, that points to a rock, and they have an OKR so management can manage it. My nephew works for Google. He's a developer. They invented the idea of an OKR. He gets together with his boss every 3 months. He said it actually doesn't matter anymore. And that to me is the beginning of the end when you have an OKR and your boss doesn't really care that much about it. So we take these things really seriously. We talked a little bit about culture. So, yeah, okay. So that's a little bit about how we built it, about how we saved our company by creating these rocks. How do you really know if it's working? You know when stuff happens and things that aren't near you enforce those rules. And it just happens. It's part of the culture, the organic culture. So we did a gig in New York not all that long ago. And it was about to start. It was a really hot day. It was in the Bowery. The door was open. And in walks a homeless man. He smelled. He was not very comfortable, but nobody cared. He sat down. He listened, like everybody else. He listened to the whole gig, the 3 bands. And what happened? Nothing. He was accepted. The gig ended, and we passed a hat to collect some extra tip money for the artists. And most people put in $1. A few people put in $5. This homeless man reached into his grubby jeans, which were barely even on him, and pulled out a $20 bill and dropped it in the hat. The person running the night ran over to him and just said, "Thank you so much. I don't know what to say. That was so generous." And he stepped back and said, "No, thank you. I haven't felt like a human being like everybody else in a long, long time." A very different story happened in LA. The opposite. I was at a gig. I was sitting down next to a woman that I didn't know, a stranger, and I had just had dinner with a friend who was an actress who went on for 2 hours about how difficult it is to be an actress in LA. And so I turned to this woman I didn't know and I said, "So, what do you do?" And she said, "Oh, I'm an actress." And I said, "That must be hard. I just spent 2 hours with my friend," and she went on and on and on about how hard it was. And this woman next to me smiled and said, yeah, it can be. So I said, "Well, I've got some ideas for you." So stupid me went on for 10 minutes before the gig started to this woman I didn't know and told her all these ideas. At which point she smiled and excused herself to go to the toilet right before the gig started. And my friend Jody ran over to me and said, "Do you know who you've just been giving advice on acting to?" I'm like, "No, just some lovely girl." That was Scarlett Johansson, Rafe. So I learned later from the mutual friend that she loved it. When was the last time she walked in a room and no one cared who she was? And the founder of this business didn't even know who she was. It was another moment about creating equality. How did we innovate? We innovated by keeping an open mind about the magic rock. We had done this in living rooms, and it's hard to find someone to be in your living room or your living room and invite strangers in and 3 bands to play. It's really hard to convince them. So when the Norwegian government said, "Rafe, we have space for you on the top of a ski slope outside Oslo because in summertime, the ski jump isn't used. Would you like to use it for one of your secret gigs? I.e. right there. And we said, are we insured? Okay. So we did it. We had a secret gig on the top of a ski jump, and we had television coverage. And everyone in Norway knew about Sofar Sounds, literally overnight, because we had an open mind about any space. Any space can be a secret gig. Final story, and then I'll open up if anyone has any questions, is about the Matters Rock. So a 14-year-old girl came to us and said through her father, can I play in LA? That would be great. And we said, well, can we hear some music? No, I don't have any music. I'm too young. I haven't put it online. So we asked her to record something, and she sent it to us, and it sounded pretty good. We are about everybody's equal. We had never had a 14-year-old girl play. So we said, sure. We said, we need to be open-minded about anybody. Well, it turns out that 14-year-old girl was Billie Eilish. If anybody knows who she is, she's now the most popular pop star on the planet. She has 40 million Instagram followers, and when we met her, she had about 3. So actually, this paid off. This is now, this video, which you can see, is our best video. It has grown our business. It is north of something like 20 million views, which is a lot for a little business focused on discovery. But the point was we were living the rocks. 14-year-old, she was good. It was magical. It mattered. And actually, it helped build our business. Last slide. I've been thinking a lot about the next decade. I don't know if you guys are as well, but we're about to go, what are we, 5 weeks away, 6 weeks away from the 20s? That's pretty crazy. So I'm thinking, what do I want to spend my time with in the 20s or even next year? And I have these rocks to rely on, both personally as well as in the business. So my challenge to all of you is, do you and your life and your business, do you really have 3, 4, 5 rocks that are your compass that can help guide you every day and understand what you want to do with your business, but also your time? That's my challenge to myself, and I guess for today, my challenge to you. What are your rocks, and how are you going to build something beautiful? Thank you.
Thank you, Rafe. Thank you for sharing these amazing stories. We do actually have time for 2 questions. If there are questions in the room, raise your hands. Okay, we have one here.
Cool. Thanks very much, Rafe. I'm a big fan of Sofar. I've been to a lot of them. A lot of my friends have played in them. It's amazing. The magic is definitely still there. You touched on, I guess, like the next 10 years, and we just heard from Job and Talent about like changing business models. Do you think at the end of the 20s, Sofar may have a different model that helps artists earn more? I've seen some of the articles you've mentioned, and I do think that the pay could be better, but I know it's like an ongoing thing for you guys. And so do you see Sofar looking very different 10 years from now from like a business model point of view?
Yeah, the core business model is working pretty well, but we're obsessing over that question right now. So we have 5 ideas on how to make artists and ourselves, ultimately, more money. So for example, our gigs are open to anybody, ticket price is $15 to $20. Let's do a private gig. So anyone in this room wants to have something special, a birthday party, what have you, we can charge a lot more. And instead of making the artist $100 where we're ticketed, it can be $1,000, $2,000, $5,000. We piloted it actually a few weeks ago. We made a band 2,500 pounds, and we made nothing. So that was one of the kind of innovative ideas. Also content. We have a lot of content. So how can we grow that and make the artists a bit of money from our growing content channel as well as ourselves? So it's a great question, and we obsess over it.
One more question before.
Yeah, thank you also very much from my side. How did your role change over the years from like starting with 3 guys up to 130? Are you still like involved in operations a lot, or what has changed over the years?
Yeah, it's really interesting as a founder. So I was CEO for 9 years and co-CEO for a while with one of the founders. And so that was really exciting, but it's also quite intense. So my role well, just back up. I used to work at Coca-Cola and Disney and Diageo. So I've seen big companies, and so I had big teams report to me. So I had some sense of the future. So that was really useful. But then when it got to a point where it was hitting 100 people, I thought it was time to bring in a CEO who was even better and even more excited about the grinding it out in the trenches growth. So my role became full-time founder and chairman of the board. So that is more of an evangelist like today, and protecting what we started and being a co-pilot with the new CEO and working day to day. So it's very, very different, but it's a nice next step. Thank you for asking.
Thanks, Rafe, again for sharing, and let's give him another round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.